Welcome to my story channel. I am Icarus Star. If you like it, welcome to subscribe. My husband's Bai Yueguang deliberately set a fire, causing me and her to be trapped in the fire scene. The firefighter husband immediately came to the rescue. He couldn't hold two people at the same time, so he chose to leave me behind. I grabbed his trousers and begged, but he kicked my hand away and said expressionlessly, "Yao Yao's foot is injured. As a dancer, she needs me more than you now." I died of despair in the flames that filled the sky. And he even forgot that my legs were disabled due to pregnancy. I watched the two people leaving and struggled to get up from the ground. But as soon as I touched the wheelchair, the burned wood fell down, completely cutting off my way of survival. The fire grew stronger and stronger, and the air became thinner and thinner. I hugged my 7-month-old pregnant belly, huddled in the corner, and closed my eyes in despair. 3 hours ago, Huazhan's Bai Yueguang suddenly broke into my bookstore and said, "If there was a fire here, who would Huazhan save first?" Before I could react, Liang Qianqian had already thrown the lighter into the pile of books. The bookstore was dry and the fire spread quickly. She guarded the door and wouldn't let me leave. "Huazhan is the firefighter here, and I know he will arrive soon. I also believe that he will rescue everyone trapped in the fire. This is his professional ethics as a firefighter." Unfortunately, I still underestimated his ruthlessness. Huazhan made a choice the moment he discovered that Liang Qianqian's foot was injured. He said coldly to me, "You stay and wait for the next rescue." I looked at him in disbelief, thinking I heard him wrong. "What?" But Huazhan's voice was extremely cold. "I can't hold two people. Are you going to drag the three of us to death here?" After that, he threw down a fire-retardant sermon. "Cover yourself with this, my teammates will come in and save you soon." When I heard his answer that he was going to leave me behind, I was so scared that I cried uncontrollably. "Huazhan, don't leave me. I still have a child in my belly and he won't be able to bear it." Before I could finish speaking, Huazhan interrupted. "Shut up. Crying and crying, so annoying. How long has it been, and you are still using your children to compete for favor? Are you done with it?" I froze in place, not understanding why he would think so. I can only hold his legs and beg him over and over again. "Huazhan, if you don't think about me, think about the child in your belly. You can't leave him alone." But he shook off my hand and said expressionlessly, "Wenqi, I know it was you who caused this fire again. You killed my sister 3 years ago, and now you want to kill Qianqian. You want to use such despicable means to win favor, but I don't want to do what you want. Remember, if the child dies, it is all the result of your evil deeds." The indifference in Huazhan's eyes made me feel like I had fallen into an ice cave. "I want to explain. No. It was always Liang Qianqian who set the fire, not me. It was she who set fires repeatedly to test Huazhan's sincerity." But before I could finish my words, Huazhan kicked me away fiercely, without even taking into account the child in his belly. The flames and high temperature instantly surrounded me. I was forced to retreat again and again by the sea of fire, huddled in the corner. I shouted at the top of my lungs, but I couldn't get Huazhan to look back softly. In his heart, my life and my child's life were not as important as Liang Qianqian's nail-sized wound. Before being swallowed up by the sea of fire, I was still staring at the direction in which he left. "Huazhan, what would happen if you knew that Liang Qianqian set the fire?" After leaving the fire scene, his teammates wondered, "Captain, why did you only rescue one?" I just heard another woman's voice on the intercom. "Is my sister-in-law still in there?" Before he could finish speaking, Liang Qianqian said weakly, "Brother Zhan, my feet hurt so much." Huazhan couldn't bear to hear Liang Qianqian cry out in pain, so he immediately forgot about me. He immediately ordered, "Close the team. Go to the hospital. Team leader. The fire scene has not yet been inspected for a second time. What if there are still people trapped inside?" Teammates expressed concern. But Huazhan frowned and said displeasedly, "There's no one inside. Follow my orders and head to the hospital." The teammates had no choice but to close the team. Liang Qianqian, who was nestling in Hua Zhan's arms, asked hypocritically, "Brother Zhan, sister Wenqi is still inside, aren't you worried?" Hua Zhan sneered and said, "She was the one who started the fire. If anything happened to her, she would have already found a way out. I won't fall for her and play such childish games with her. However, this is not a game, I am really dead." My soul was floating in the air. Listening to the conversation between Hua Zhan and Liang Qianqian, I felt cold all over my body. Hua Zhan talked about me with disgust on his face. Fortunately I am dead and he will never see anyone he hates again. Hua Zhan escorted Liang Qianqian all the way to the hospital and stayed in front of her bed all day and night. Liang Qianqian was awakened by a nightmare and cried so hard that it felt very distressing. "Brother Zhan, I'm really scared. I'm afraid of the fire, and I'm even more afraid of never seeing you again." Hua Zhan caressed her back gently, with a gentleness on his face that I had never seen before. "Don't be afraid, Qianqian. I will always be by your side and I promise that nothing will happen to you, okay?" This is the first time I have seen such a patient and gentle Hua Zhan. Even when my parents died in a car accident, he never said a word of comfort to me. It turns out that Hua Zhan is not good at words and has a cold personality. His tenderness is just never used on me. Hua Zhan and I met in college, and he started pursuing me fiercely at the first sight. Having never had any love experience, I naively thought I had met my destiny. But after being with him, I realized that Hua Zhan had an unforgettable first love, Bai Yueguang. And I look somewhat similar to her, but as humble as me. I love Hua Zhan so much that I can't help myself. So when I found out that I was a substitute, I was actually a little lucky. Maybe Hua Zhan will never leave me in his whole life. But I was wrong. Fake products can never be as good as genuine products. His Bai Yueguang, Liang Qianqian returned to China. The night Hua Zhan and I received our certificates, we slept at Liang Qianqian's house. I really wanted to lose my temper with him like a normal couple, but I didn't dare because I was too afraid that he would say, "If you can't stand it, get out. Without you as a stumbling block, Qianqian and I would have reconciled long ago." In his eyes, my pregnant wife is a stumbling block that prevents him from being with the one he truly loves. Hua Zhan had to marry me because of his parents and the flesh and blood in my belly. Later, in order to gain Hua Zhan's attention, Liang Qianqian went to my parents' house and set fire to it. It happened that Hua Zhan's sister was also there. She died in the fire trying to save me. But Liang Qianqian later bit back and slandered me. Hua Zhan firmly believes in this. From then on, he often said nasty things to me. But more often than not, he is indifferent, always turning a blind eye to me while living under the same roof. Hua Zhan, who was so indifferent, took great care of Liang Qianqian. Liang Qianqian just frowned, and Hua Zhan quickly called the nurse to come in to check, with a worried look on his face. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. I remembered that in my 3rd trimester of pregnancy, my nerves were compressed by my enlarging belly, and my legs hurt so much that I almost lost consciousness. I begged him to take me to the hospital, but Hua Zhan just glanced at me and refused coldly. "Stop pretending. If you can't bear it, have it aborted. It's not like I'm forcing you to give birth to my child." Later, my legs were temporarily disabled due to pregnancy, and I could only rely on a wheelchair to move around. But Hua Zhan still didn't believe it and thought I was faking it. During that time, I was so frightened that I always dreamed of my own death. He said angrily, "If you want to die, die. Don't bother me here all the time." Unexpectedly, as he wished, I really died. Now that I am no longer a stumbling block, Hua Zhan can run towards true love again. My charred corpse, burned beyond recognition, lay in the morgue for 3 days without anyone claiming it. In the past 3 days, Hua Zhan's teammate Qin Jia came to see him several times. My mood became more and more anxious every time. "Captain, why hasn't your sister-in-law come to the bureau to bring you food these days? There is still a charred corpse that remains unclaimed, and the place where the fire broke out happened to be my sister-in-law's bookstore. I'm afraid, Why don't you call your sister-in-law and find out where she is? Unexpectedly, Huazhan didn't even raise his head. He only concentrated on applying medicine to Liang Qianqian. He sneered and said with great determination. Snort. I knew it. She is having a temper with me, so don't worry about her. Hide if you like, I'm too lazy to look for it. He firmly believed that I would not die in the fire he designed, so he would naturally not care about my whereabouts. Huazhan may have thought that I just ran back to my parents' house like the previous quarrels and cold wars. When Qin Jia heard this, he stamped his feet anxiously. Captain, I called my sister-in-law's house to check, but she didn't come home. Where could she run with a 7-month-old pregnant belly? That unclaimed charred corpse happens to be a pregnant woman. Why don't you go and take a look? Huazhan helped Liang Qianqian apply the medicine, then helped her lie down and covered her with a quilt. This time he raised his head and glanced at the extremely anxious Qin Jia. His eyes were full of worry and anxiety, his brows were furrowed, and the corners of his mouth were stretched into a straight line. Huazhan had never seen Qin Jia look so anxious. Although he was still a little reluctant, he still nodded perfunctorily. Okay, then I'll go see it with you. Unexpectedly, before Huazhan finished speaking, he was interrupted by Liang Qianqian. Brother Zhan, my feet suddenly hurt so much. I won't be able to dance anymore, right? Can you stay with me? I'm afraid. Qin Jia took a look at Liang Qianqian's wounds. It was obviously only a scratch the size of a fingernail, but she still stayed in the hospital for 3 days. He was furious. Liang Qianqian, are you finished? My sister-in-law has been missing for 3 days. This is a matter of life and death. Can you please stop interfering here? Brother Zhan can't see that you, green tea, want to destroy other people's families, and I'm not blind. Qin Jia was outspoken and scolded both of them in a few words. When Huazhan heard this, he became angry from shame. Enough! If you dare to say that Qianqian is not trying again, I will peel off a layer of your skin. After saying the cruel words, Huazhan still couldn't get rid of his anger and continued to talk in a weird way. Although Qianqian and I were once lovers, she and I are now innocent. Not like you. Don't think I don't know that you covet your sister-in-law. Qin Jia is my junior classmate. If Huazhan hadn't been chasing me so hard at that time, I guess I would have gotten together with Qin Jia. I really didn't expect that Huazhan would remember this matter for so long. Qin Jia, don't think I don't know why you are so nervous about Wen Qi. Last time in the lounge, if I hadn't discovered it in time, I don't know what unethical things you would have done. I remembered that it was a team building in the bureau, and everyone was divided into 2 teams to play football. But Huazhan was a bit ungrateful in order to win the game. When he and Qin Jia were fighting, he secretly scratched his waist. The claw mark was as long as a forearm, and blood was still oozing out. Of course I can't stand my husband being such a bully. So he called Qin Jia to come over and apply the medicine. Unexpectedly, Huazhan walked in as soon as he lifted up his clothes. He glared at me, snorted and walked away. Afterwards, I explained to him no less than 10 times. But he said, Wen Qi, do you think I care? I didn't expect that he was not thinking about what he said and was still worrying about this matter until now. Qin Jia reacted and turned red. Huazhan, don't blame me for what you did. Wen Qi and I are not as dirty as you two. I was floating in midair, watching helplessly as Huazhan took Qin Jia out of the ward and closed the door with a bang. Huazhan was very angry. I looked at him, as if he was a little annoyed by what Qin Jia said, and I couldn't help but smile bitterly. People who make mistakes always use bluff to cover up the truth. After Qin Jia was driven away, Liang Qianqian quickly got out of bed and hugged Huazhan. She said aggrievedly while giving him some relief, Brother Zhan, it's all my fault that caused you to quarrel with him. Don't get angry because of me, it will break your body. Huazhan touched her head with a distressed expression and said, Qianqian, don't forget to take what he just said to your heart. I won't believe you are such a person. As for what Wen Qi wants to do, I can't control it and I don't want to. You can rest in peace and recuperate. I will always be with you. What a tender scene. Huajuan and I have been married for so long, but it has never happened once. How ridiculous, how ridiculous. The two of them love each other so deeply, and if I had not died, I would really have become a stumbling block preventing them from running towards each other. 2 days later, the test results came out. Grandma was notified to identify the body. She looked at my burnt body and kept shouting my nickname. She was crying so hard that she was out of breath and almost fainted. After my parents passed away, my grandma and I depended on each other. At home, she always loved me as a child and called me Nyonya one after another. The year before last, my grandma was in poor health and had a minor operation, which scared me so much that I cried for 3 days and 3 nights. I always nag her to take care of herself and not leave me so early. But she didn't expect that she would be given a gift from a white-haired person to a black-haired person. She cried and called Huajuan, but Huajuan didn't answer the call. In the end, she even blocked her grandma's phone number. He probably thought I asked grandma to call. Qinjia was the second person to receive my death message. He didn't even bother with the car and ran for several kilometers to get there. Qinjia collapsed the moment she saw her grandma. He reached out to touch me, but didn't know where to start. A pair of hands stagnated in midair, and finally turned into slaps, all falling on his face. He cried bitterly. "It's all my fault. If I had spoken out earlier and advised you to leave that scumbag, you wouldn't have ended up like this," Qinjia said while crying. The strong man who was over 1.8 meters knelt on the ground and cried like a child. I lowered my eyes and sighed silently. As infatuated as I am, I actually had the thought of leaving Huajuan. But I always think that love can be cultivated. I always tell myself that if I persist a little longer, maybe Huajuan will see me one day. I didn't understand until I died. I shouldn't place my hopes on such an illusory thing as love. It will let people down the most. Qinjia helped grandma handle my funeral affairs, and then went to the hospital with my death certificate. In the ward, Huajuan was combing Liang Qianqian's hair carefully. She obviously only hurt her foot, but she seemed disabled and needed Huajuan's help in everything. When grandma saw this, she was so angry that she raised her crutch and hit Huajuan's hand hard. "Huajuan, you bastard. Xiaoqi died so tragically, but you still have the leisure to make love to other women here. Are you still human?" After saying this, grandma covered her chest excitedly, and her whole body was shaking with anger. Huajuan groaned in pain, held his injured arm, turned his head and said helplessly, "Grandma, how old are you? Why are you still lying and fooling around with Wen Qi? I know she doesn't like Qianqian, but there's no need to joke about her own death, right?" As soon as Huajuan said this, grandma was so angry that she ran away. Her body lay alone in the morgue for 5 days. "Why didn't you identify it?" After saying that, she suddenly raised her crutch and hit Huajuan on the head, with the momentum that she was going to kill him here. Huajuan couldn't avoid it, and soon a large swelling appeared on his forehead. But he was very unconvinced and said angrily, "Wen Qi must be sick." Grandma even told her to curse herself to death. She was really not afraid of bad luck. Don't think that I don't know that the fire was caused by her. How could she, who is so afraid of pain, let the fire burn her alive? Before Huajuan finished speaking, Qinjia threw him to the ground. Qinjia was riding on Huajuan, waving his fists constantly and hitting him in the face again and again. He beat and cursed at the same time. "It wasn't enough for you to kill Wen Qi, you also accused her of arson after her death. You are a fucking scumbag." Huajuan was pushed to the ground and beaten violently by the furious Qinjia. Soon, he saw blood. If grandma hadn't pulled Qinjia back in time, Huajuan's nose would have been broken. He quickly got up from the ground, covering his bleeding nose in embarrassment. Qinjia was held down by her grandma and couldn't do anything, so she pointed at Huajuan's nose and cursed. "Wen Qi is so afraid of fire that she doesn't even dare to barbecue. You said she dared to set fire. Has shit been poured into your head? I used to call you captain because you are a senior firefighter that I respect, but I never thought that you would throw your wife into the fire for a mistress and lie that there was no one inside. You're fucking killing people, you know that. Qin Jia has remembered my fear of fire since college. But as my boyfriend and husband, Hua Zhan didn't know anything about it. I smiled bitterly, he never cared about me. Seeing that the excited Qin Jia was about to wave his fist again, Liang Qianqian, who was crying on the side, rushed forward, protected Hua Zhan behind her and said, "Why do you slander brother Zhan so much? Wen Qi has such a vicious heart that he actually incited you all to beat people together." When grandma heard this, she couldn't bear it anymore and rushed forward and slapped Liang Qianqian hard in the face. "Shut up. You deserve the most beating here. If you don't learn well at a young age, you will act like a coquettish mistress to seduce other people's husbands and destroy other people's families. Neither you nor this heartless man will end well." Seeing Liang Qianqian being beaten, Hua Zhan looked at his grandma with fierce eyes and warned, "Because you are an elder, I only let you be reasonable. If you dare to touch Qianqian again, don't blame me for being rude. Also, please save yourself from these scenes of crying, making trouble, and hanging yourself. Go back and tell Wen Qi that after I finish taking care of Qianqian, I will naturally take the time to deal with her. If she continues to be so unreasonable, don't blame me for releasing all the chat records of her swearing this morning. She will be the one who is embarrassed then." Before grandma and Qin Jia could ask questions, Hua Zhan took the lead in dumping the message he received on his phone. I floated behind the two of them and browsed through more than 100 messages insulting Liang Qianqian. "You know your best. Are you afraid that others won't know that you love to steal men? Is this how your mother taught you? I warn you, if I see your face next to my husband again, I will slap you to pieces." Thousands of words were written eloquently, greeting all 18 generations of Liang Qianqian's ancestors. Between the lines, there is clearly no tone like mine. Unfortunately, Hua Zhan didn't notice it at all. Besides, I really want to tell him that I have been dead for 5 days and my body has been cremated. How can I send a message? But Hua Zhan sneered at this moment and said, "How? While she is encouraging you to act, she is also chasing Qianqian and scolding her. Do you see clearly such a duplicitous person? You dare to say that she is dead, what a joke." Hua Zhan changed the subject and said magnanimously, "Qianqian is not such a petty person. As long as Wen Qi is willing to come over and apologize, we will not pursue it." Before he could finish speaking, grandma threw a cane in his face and cried in anger, "You have been married for so long, and you haven't even figured out what kind of person Shao Qi is. I was blinded by lard before I handed Shao Qi over to you. What a sin." Hua Zhan looked at the crutches that fell at his feet, and finally broke out unbearably, "Good. Since you, old and young, are both shameless, then there is no need for me to care about your face." After that, he took out his mobile phone and made a video call to me. Soon, the video call was connected on the other side. Miraculously, I actually saw my own face in the video. I floated next to Hua Zhan and touched my face in a daze, feeling very sure that I was dead. So who am I on the other side? As soon as Hua Zhan saw my face, he started to curse. "Wen Qi, is it fun to conspire with so many people to deceive me? Don't think I feel guilty, I really want you to die now." I didn't speak in the video, but smiled weirdly. Hua Zhan was furious when he saw this. "You are laughing your ass off. Why don't you hurry up and take your grandma back? How long do you plan to keep her in the hospital? Qianqian still needs to rest. Give you an hour to come here or we'll get a divorce, you hear me?" In the past, I almost obeyed Hua Zhan. As long as he gives the order, I can do it no matter how difficult it is. But this time, I'm afraid I can't do what he wants. Hua Zhan does not need to divorce a dead person, he should be widowed now. Grandma had already burst into tears. She tremblingly threw my death certificate at his face and said, "See for yourself whether we are lying to you or not." Hua Zhan picked up the death certificate and looked over it. Obviously, even now, he still doesn't believe that I'm dead. Liang Qianqian on the side suddenly covered her chest and said weakly, "Brother Zhan, my chest suddenly hurts so much." After saying that, she fell into Hua Zhan's arms artificially. Seeing this, Huazhan didn't care about anything else. He quickly picked her up and rushed out without caring about it, shouting, "Doctor! Doctor!" Huazhan's voice was more anxious than I've ever heard. He would only do this when facing Liang Qianqian. This is the difference between love and not love. Grandma looked at his leaving figure and fell to the ground in anger, beating her chest and crying bitterly. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have handed Shaoqi over to him and ended up like this." I floated beside her, anxious, but the hand that wanted to wipe Grandma's tears could not be touched. At this moment Qin Jia's cell phone suddenly rang. It was a call from the investigation department. "Hello, the investigation on Huazhan's fire scene recorder that you submitted has been revealed. Now I need to trouble you to come here to cooperate with the investigation." It turned out that Qin Jia did not dispel his doubts about Huazhan's rhetoric and submitted his fire scene recorder to the investigation department. In this way, the fact that Huazhan left me in the fire will soon be announced. When Grandma heard this, she closed her eyes heavily and said firmly, "Walk. I must seek justice for Xiaoyun." I wanted to go too, but I didn't expect that as soon as I followed me to the door of the hospital, I would be pulled back to Huazhan by a magical force. Here, Liang Qianqian woke up as soon as she left the ward. Curling up in Huazhan's arms, she said delicately, "Brother Zhan, I'm sorry. It's all because of my poor health. I faint frequently and make you worry. Leave me alone and go back with them to find Sister Wenqi, otherwise I don't know what trouble she will cause again." Liang Qianqian's words were both sensible and aggrieved, which made Huazhan feel very distressed. Hearing my name, he said coldly, "I didn't expect her to be so capable of seeking death. Since she has the strength to do it, let her do it for a few more days, so that I won't be annoyed when I go back. Her character is not worthy of having a child. When she comes back, I will have her abort it." Huazhan's tone was so serious that I felt like I had fallen into an ice cave. If I hadn't died yet, he would have asked me to abort the child who was 7 months pregnant. My heart, which was so dead that it couldn't die anymore, couldn't help but ache when I heard this. At this moment, I regretted falling in love with Huazhan. If I hadn't met her, would my life have been different? Huazhan just held Liang Qianqian in his arms and coaxed her gently. Knowing that Liang Qianqian was asleep, he left quietly. Huazhan drove to the market and bought a lot of seafood, then went home to make porridge for Liang Qianqian. Even if his finger was scratched by a crab, it didn't stop him from continuing. I stood aside and watched, with mixed feelings in my heart. After being married for so long, Huazhan has never cooked for me once. Sometimes I would imitate Liang Qianqian's example of acting like a baby and want him to cook for me. But Huazhan frowned and said with a look of disgust, "Qianqian is still young and needs me to take care of you. You are such a big person, you have hands and feet, what a giant baby you are." But he forgot. Liang Qianqian is obviously an adult with hands and feet. Huazhan carefully put the cooked porridge into a thermos cup, and then drove to Liang Qianqian's residence. He even knew the password to her home. After entering, he went to the bedroom with ease. An intimate photo of the two of them cheek by jowl hangs above Liang Qianqian's bed. The actions of the two looked like they were taking a couple photo. Huazhan opened Liang Qianqian's wardrobe and put her underwear into her luggage bag very naturally. It can be seen that this is not the first time for him. I found that there were still a lot of clothes belonging to Huazhan hanging in Liang Qianqian's wardrobe. This reminds me of the past. Huazhan does not go home every day. He told me that he is on night shift. Sometimes his clothes would be different from what he wore out in the morning. Out of doubt, when I asked more questions, he would suddenly explode and say, "Of course I will change my clothes when I take a shower in the bureau. What do you have to ask? Are you tired of feeling suspicious all day long? If you can get over it, get divorced if you can't." From then on, I never dared to question him again. It seems that his anger at that time was due to a guilty conscience. The night shift he told me turned out to be Liang Qianqian's. In fact, there were already hints of his infidelity, but I was just deceiving myself. Now that the truth has been revealed, I have long since calmed down. Huajuan packed up Liang Qianqian's change of clothes and rushed to the hospital with hot porridge. But as soon as she stepped into the ward, she saw 2 police officers surrounding Liang Qianqian, preparing to handcuff her. Huajuan rushed forward with quick eyes and hands, protected Liang Qianqian behind him and asked, "What are you doing? Why arrest Qianqian? Did Wen Qi instigate you to cause trouble?" Huajuan's indiscriminate questioning made the 2 policemen blush. "Sir, watch your words. We are the police with certificates. Liang Qianqian is suspected of an intentional homicide case. Now she needs to be taken back to the police station for investigation. Please get out of the way. Can the police arrest people at will? What evidence do you have?" Huajuan said reluctantly. Seeing this, the police had no choice but to produce evidence. Unexpectedly, Liang Qianqian posted the video she took during the arson incident online. Her original intention was to make netizens envy their undying love, but she didn't expect that the reviews were not what she expected. In the video, Liang Qianqian focuses on Huarong, my Huajuan's sister. "The way we were trying to avoid the sparks made her laugh. Oh my god. The mistress uses arson to test the man's sincerity, such a niche text. The woman in the video seems to be pregnant. She looks like she's about to give birth. She was really unlucky enough to meet such a pair of misfits. I remember she was a habitual arsonist, and this wasn't the first time. Didn't the younger girl in the first video die in the fire? I knew them. One of them was the man's sister and the other was the man's wife. They all died in the fire designed by the mistress. It really made my skin stand on end." Huajuan's face became whiter and whiter until there was no blood left. As if he was greatly stimulated, he threw the phone back to the police, shook his head and said tremblingly, "Impossible. This is impossible." As if he wanted to be verified, he turned around and grabbed Liang Qianqian and shouted desperately, "This is not your fault, right? Liang Qianqian, please speak up." Liang Qianqian couldn't lie in front of the police. She couldn't say yes or no, so she had to lower her head and remain silent, her eyes full of panic. The policeman spoke for her. "We interrogated you before you came back, and she admitted it herself. Now please get out of the way, we are going to detain her." Huajuan was stunned when he heard this and was stunned for a long time. When he came back to his senses, his eyes were full of violence. He suddenly raised his hand and hit Liang Qianqian's always pitiful face, once, twice, 3 times, beating and scolding at the same time. "You killed my sister, and you killed my wife. I'm going to kill you. You lied to me." If the police hadn't stopped her, Liang Qianqian might not have been able to walk out of the hospital alive. Liang Qianqian was beaten until her face was covered with blood. She covered her broken teeth, but she cursed unwillingly. "Don't talk about yourself so high. One slap can't make a sound. Isn't it great when you and I have sex? What, do you regret it now? If you're to blame, blame it on you for not taking care of your lower body." Liang Qianqian was always gentle and soft-spoken in front of Huajuan. How could she have such a cute side? As soon as these words came out, Huajuan reacted instantly. "Those abusive messages were also your fault, right?" Liang Qianqian broke the jar and stopped pretending, and sneered. "Idiot, did you just find out? If your family didn't have a lot of money, I would really look down on your IQ." Liang Qianqian's words were both murderous and heartbreaking. "You." Huajuan opened his mouth for a long time, but he couldn't say a complete sentence. Instead, he was overly frightened and unable to resist. He rolled his eyes and fainted. The day Huajuan woke up happened to be my funeral. He rushed to the scene, but was stopped by Qin Jia. "I'm here to attend my wife's funeral, why do you stop me?" Seeing that he couldn't get in, Huajuan was so anxious that he cursed. Qin Jia didn't say much to him, raised his hand and punched his already injured nose. "Do you still have the nerve to come? Wen Qi was killed by you. The last thing she wants to see right now is you. Get out." When Huajuan heard this, a bit of bitterness flashed across his face. He wanted to say something, but was interrupted by his grandma. "Huajuan, if you still have some conscience, don't make trouble at Xiaoqi's funeral." Let her go with dignity. Grandma finished speaking while holding back tears, then pulled Qingjia and turned around and left. That day, it was stormy. Huazhan knelt outside the door for a whole day. He didn't even get to see my ashes until they were buried. Grandma, please let me say sorry to her, or at least say goodbye to her. Huazhan has been begging outside, but no one feels sorry for him, let alone relents. I floated in front of Huazhan and listened to his confession over and over again. But I only replied coldly, Huazhan, it's too late. After that day, he began to stay at his grandma's house. I knelt down and apologized, and just begged my grandma to let him take a look at my tombstone. But facing the beast who killed her precious granddaughter, Grandma showed no mercy. Even God can't bear to see a scum pretending to be affectionate. Soon, the results of the trial came from the investigation department. As a firefighter, Huazhan failed to do his best to rescue every trapped person, and as a captain, he concealed the truth from his subordinates, which led to my death. These two crimes are enough to make Huazhan unable to become a firefighter again for the rest of his life. The record of his life will always bear the stigma of dereliction of duty. He may even face jail time. The day Huazhan's punishment was announced coincided with the opening of Liang Qianqian's arson case. Liang Qianqian's family lost everything because of her and hired a gold medal lawyer. The lawyer turned the situation around with his sharp tongue. Liang Qianqian was found not guilty and released in court. Huazhan, who was sitting in the audience, clenched the dagger hidden in his clothes and followed secretly. The media surrounded Liang Qianqian for interviews, and she was still shedding tears in a pretentious manner, trying to win sympathy by confusing right and wrong. At this time, Huazhan suddenly broke through the crowd and rushed forward. By the time everyone reacted, Huazhan's knife had already pierced Liang Qianqian's heart. Liang Qianqian barely had time to cry out for help before she fell to the ground and died. Half an hour ago, she was still congratulating herself that she had been exonerated. But now he is lying under the sword of his former lover. Huazhan looked at Liang Qianqian, who was dying. As if he was still not satisfied, he pulled out his dagger and stabbed her hard again and again. For a moment, blood splattered everywhere, and the air was filled with blood. The reporters and onlookers were so frightened that they ran away. It wasn't until Liang Qianqian's left breast was cut to pieces with a knife that the guards arrived at the scene and captured the already crazy Huazhan. Now, Huazhan's crime will be added to murder. He was afraid that he would never be able to get out of prison. Huazhan was kneeling on the ground in pain, with blood and tears on his face. He suddenly stretched out his hand in my direction and choked. Wenqi, I'm sorry. I failed you in this life. If I could love you in the next life, would you? I really regret it. I looked at him, shook my head for a long time and said, not good. Huazhan, if there is an afterlife, I will hide far away and never see you again.